What up, wizards? It's Dev. That's my new theme song. No, it's not. You like the old one too much. Hey, guys, we are here for a chill video where we just chill. I'm tired. I'm so tired. So what we're going to do today is bring it home, baby. We got the last, 30 plus Aetherdrift cards today in a common dump, as they like to do. Some cards were uncommon. No cards were rare, so that happened. But, usually the last day of previews is a bunch of junka, and that was the case today. But as I usually do, I went through and kind of handpicked 15 this time to look at that I think are either the best of the day or interesting in some way. So, final Aetherdrift preview, let it rip, let's go, baby. Now, you'll see the card on screen is Ancient Vendetta. You've already noticed that. We opened on that. So let's read it together. 4 mana, 3 and a black for a sorcery. Choose a card name. Search target opponent's graveyard, hand, and library for up to 4 cards with that name. Exile them. That player shuffles. Probably not great. I'm just gonna put this out here. There's a reason this card's first. Although the cards today aren't in really any particular order except the last card, which I'm kind of excited about the most. But when it comes to Vendetta, I am a little bit wary of this because it doesn't affect the board state. It doesn't affect the cards in your hand or anything like that. I will say with this is one of the very few effects like this that if you get a card out of your opponent's hand, they don't get to draw a card to replace it, which I think is kind of neat, right? And it's very likely that you know what's in their hand if you Deep Cavern batted them early in the game or something. So you might be able to hit big with this thing right here. So I kind of want to try it out, but I'm just not really sure if it's quite good enough. I think you'd rather just be playing dudes to the board. But there's a few decks that this could completely neuter as soon as it resolves. But we've already got some effects in standard a bit like this. And although they do see sparing play, right? They usually do something else on top of this, like Deadly Cover Up, right? But I guess now we're looking at a deck that has 4 different ways of doing this, right? Stone Brain 'em, you can Deadly Cover Up, you can Ancient Vendetta, so they just don't have any cards. You can cast The End, I think that works too. So it sounds fun, but is a 4 mana don't actually affect anything that's currently happening in the game good? I don't think so, but it is a pretty neat card. They just printed this effect. Usually this effect does something else, but they just printed, no, just here, have this, give it a shot, but I don't know, I think it could be cool. Next, though, is Broadside Barrage. There's a couple of removal spells that I've included today, mostly because you need to know they exist for limited, and this is not necessarily one of them. I think this could actually be somewhat playable in standard. It all depends on what Reanimator decks we actually play, right? This is probably worse than Bitter Triumph. In most cases, right? Triumph costs 2 mana, and it's in Reanimator colors. You don't have to go Grixis to play that like you do this. But this blows up almost, right? Anything that Bitter Triumph does, and allows you to draw and discard a card. You see how it doesn't require you to discard a card or, pay 3 life or whatever. Draw, discard is way, way better. So, last set we got Refute, Counterspell, similar mana cost, 3 mana. That says draw and then discard. And I like that counterspell, so I like this removal spell. I think it's kind of okay. Especially the instant speed makes it pretty good. But Burner Rocket is up next. I thought this little thing was neat. This is 2 mana, 1 and a red for a 3/1 vehicle with flash, and it crews for 1. When it enters, target creature you control gains +2/+0 and gains trample until end of turn. So what this is actually a 2 mana pump spell that leaves a body on the table. I think it's cool, man. Combat trick that can deal, your dudes can deal more damage. I think the trample is actually really, really good. Weirdly, the rocket itself does not have trample, but I guess the rocket, the rocket and the assembly of the rocket would not necessarily have trample. But if you strap a creature to the rocket, which I think is the, the flavor here, then yeah, it makes sense that the creature would gain trample. But anyway, just a neat little thing, man. I like a pump spell attached to a body with a decent power for the rate. I don't know. Again, trample's good, so kind of like it, man. But Chitin Gravestalker is up next. This is 6 mana, 5 and a red for a 5/4 insect warrior that cycles for 2. He also costs 1 less to cast for each artifact and or creature card in your graveyard. So it's not Gurmag Angler, but it is common, and we have a few effects like this in standard, Huskburster Swarm and Hollow Marauder and stuff. And I think that by and large, those cards are probably better than this one. That said, this is a, reasonably low casting cost to reduce, right? It doesn't start at like 6, 7 mana or whatever, and you reduce it to 1 black mana. It actually starts at 6 instead of 7 or 8 or whatever. Again, some of these cards in Standard, I think, have higher base casting cost than this guy. Also, I guess if you want to compare him to Gurmag Angler, this one you don't have to delve the cards away. They're just there. It doesn't just cost or count creatures, it counts artifacts. That could be important. And of course, it cycles itself to reduce the cost of the next one. So altogether, I think it's a cool little creature. Don't really think it sees much play in Standard, but ultimately, we've come a long way since Gurmag Angler. But when you see a Gurmag Angler in the wild, you still probably want to point it out, right? Gallant Strike is next. 2 mana, 1 and a white for an instant. Cycles for 2. You can destroy target creature with toughness 4 or greater. So, look, what is it? Valorous Stance. That's in Standard. Doesn't really see too much play. Destroy Evil is in Standard and does not see play anymore because Get Lost is kind of the thing of choice that people are playing. This, I don't think it's as good as the 2 cards I've already mentioned, and it's certainly not as good as Get Lost. But it is also always active, like it's always lit up. Like no matter what you're playing against, like you can either draw a card off of this or you can like remove a really big creature, which is a decent mode too. Apart from that, it's got a dog on it, and I like him. Little helmet, that's nice. But anyway, this is actually like a pretty solid little card here. I've noticed that in this set, cycling is not always just on bad cards. Oh, we made a bad card slightly less bad. Like, no, they're putting cycling on decent cards. Pretty interesting. Gastal Thrillseeker is one of my favorite cards of the day, and there's kind of a pretty important little bit about this dude. He cost a black and a red, so 2 mana for a 2/3. Start your engines, Lizard Berserker. When you have max speed, this dude has Death Touch and Haste. But when he enters, he deals a damage to target opponent, and you gain 1 life. All right, so first of all, Lizard's decks. Obviously, the dude's a lizard. He does the damage when he comes into play, so that'll proc a bunch of your lizards get better effects, and that's kind of cool. He's a really cheap way to start your engines, just 2 mana. But the cool thing about this is that if you didn't play a 1-drop that increased your speed, the way this will work is you'll play it on turn 2, it'll start your engines. You might have to... this isn't an enter the battlefield trigger, start your engines. So it should just be static. All right, so this enters play, you have a speed, right? But when the enter the battlefield trigger goes off, when this creature enters, it deals a damage to target opponent. When that goes off, it should increase your speed to 2 on turn 2. And that's kind of like otherwise difficult to do in most cases. So actually get your speed up to a decent level on turn 2 if you weren't able to increase it on turn 1. I like that. But if you were able to get speed on turn 1, this guarantees you increase it on turn 2. See, it's pretty sick. Even outside of limited, that's sick. That might be cool in Standard, but maybe decent in the Lizards decks. I think there's probably better things, but not everything just ETBs and like instantly triggers all your Lizards getting better. You know what I mean? So could be more than playable. Watch out for this little uncommon here. But Guidelight Matrix is up next. An interesting card. There's a number of these on the list. 2 mana for an artifact. When it enters, draw a card. You can also pay 2 and tap it to have a mount you control become saddled till end of turn. You can do that at sorcery speed. You can also pay 2 and tap it to have a vehicle you control become an artifact until end of turn. An artifact creature, rather. And that is not sorcery speed, which I have just now noticed. If you're going to saddle a mount, it's sorcery speed, which makes some degree of sense because, usually mounts don't care about blocking. It's just when this creature attacks while saddled. Whereas you're going to be more likely, I guess you'd be likely to block with a mount, but you have to activate a vehicle to block with it. So the card just lets you do that on your opponent's turn. I just like this. I like Prophetic Prisms and Ichor Wellsprings and stuff like that. 2 mana artifacts that come to play, draw a card, and then do something else later. Wedding Invitation is another example. Even though that card didn't see like any play. And I'm not sure this one will either, to be honest. I don't think that it's that good, but again, interesting card here. If you don't have a creature to saddle a mount or, crew a vehicle, then you can just get in. You just sit it on the table and keep getting in with your stuff. I think that's pretty cool, actually. There's a lot of times in a game where you don't have the requisite creature to get, a mount or a vehicle in. So this just makes sure you always do have that. But is it worth like putting in your deck when it could be a different card? Opportunity cost, right? I don't think so, like most of the time, but it's cool. Memory Guardian is a dangerous magic card. 5 mana, 4 and a blue for a 3/4 artifact creature. It's a robot artificer. It has flying, and it also has, just so you know, Affinity for artifacts. So this is a 1 blue mana 3/4 flyer. Is what this is. You know, probably won't see like, you know, modern play or anything. I'm not saying that it's like good in original affinity, which I don't even think plays that many affinity cards anymore. But if you'll excuse me, I do think that it's easy enough to get this into play on like turn 3 in standard for a single mana, which is wild, right? Because yeah, you had to wait until turn 3, at which point like a 3/4 flyer seems a little bit more fair, right? But you only spent 1 mana to do it. So maybe you have Counterspell magic up, maybe you have Removal magic up, maybe you have play another 2 Memory Guardians mana up, you know what I mean? Like 1 mana on turn 3 for this is, I think, like incredibly reasonable, very doable, and extremely good. Extremely good. It doesn't die to Gope of the Throat. It doesn't die to Virtual Persistence. Do I have to go through this whole list again? No cut downs. No Anoint with Afflictions because it costs 5, right? It just refuses to die to black removal, honestly. So I think it's actually kind of a stout little magic card, dude. I want to try it out. You know, Spyglass Siren puts an artifact into play. So much stuff puts artifacts into play for really, really cheap that I think you get this like hella early. But Scrounging Skyray's up next. He kind of looks freaky to me. But this is 2 mana, 1 and a blue for a 1/2 fish pirate with flying and cycling too. Whenever you discard 1 or more cards, put that many +1/+1 counters on this dude. Now, I don't like this quite as much as the 1-drop Minotaur that effectively does the exact same thing. He's got the same text, only this has flying. That guy doesn't. You would think that flying would make the card like way better, and like it probably makes the card okay, right? I'm not saying the card's bad, but it also costs twice as much as the 1-drop, and you know you have to wait another turn to actually discard something to it to make it grow. So I'm not too sure, but I guess on the floor, the ceiling here, you get a Stormcrow. So I guess it's actually the best card of all time. It's a better Stormcrow. I'm still making those memes 20 years later. But yeah, I mean, obviously there's nothing wrong with this dude, and I had to point him out, especially if you're in like, is it in draft? You know, if you actually get couple of the Minotaur, 1 or 2 of this guy, like, you probably go crazy with your cycling deck. You know what I mean? So stiff dude, kind of like him, but again, I don't think he's quite as like standard, like competitive playable as a 1-drop. He costs 100% more. I should have said that earlier. I think I may have said it costs 50% more. It costs 100% more. I know it sounds like hyperbole because it only costs 2, but trust me, it ain't. A turn is a huge difference. Skycrash is up next. Legally distinct from Skyfall. This is 3 mana, 1 and a red for an instant. Destroy target artifact. Cycling red. So, instant speed. Strictly better Shatter, which I think is fine. You know, it's been 30 years since Shatter was released, so I think we can probably upgrade it a little bit. We have. It's not like we haven't upgraded Shatter before, but cycling for a single red mana for this effect is so good, man. Like, I like pretty much anything that cycles for a single mana. I think that increases the viability of a card by a lot just by itself. But when you have a fairly playable magic card here that you just cash in for a 1 mana, like, yeah, I think that's fantastic. In Limited, this is insanely playable because there's going to be vehicles and stuff just floating around that's going to have all the targets in the world. And depending on what your opponent's playing, you could probably get some pretty good mana value on them. But in Standard, man, I don't know, dude. I think this is actually a pretty strong card, all things considered. Spin Out is up next. This is a piece of removal I just think you should know about, right? This is 3 mana, 1 black for an instant. Destroy target creature or vehicle. So it's a hero's downfall, but instead of planeswalkers, it hits vehicles. And it's also common. So pick up a couple of copies of this at your pre-release, you know, and if it's in your sealed pool, probably play it. It's not the most efficient removal spell in the world, but you'll play it. Ticket Tortoise is up next. I just thought this guy was cool. 2 mana for a 3/1 artifact creature. It's a turtle with Defender. When it enters, if an opponent controls more lands than you create a treasure token. That's neat. This is probably mostly playable in Limited if it's playable there, but I kind of like this. I do, you know, it ramps for you. It is kind of a take on a couple of white cards like Knight of the White Orchid and beyond, you know, Claim Jumper, that can get you some more mana if you're down on mana currently. Only in this case, again, any deck can play it. I think that's kind of nice. So I don't think it's going to see any play, but cards like this are sometimes like surprisingly decent, especially when they get you a land. But sometimes cards like this just put the land in your hand, where this just like ramps you entirely. Meanwhile, like Knight of the White Orchid or whatever, like that puts the lands directly into play. It's really, really good. But this isn't that good, but it's still kind of all right. I think it's worth bringing up. Voyager Quickwelder might be a commander playable here. 3 mana, 2 and a white for an artifact creature. It's a robot artificer. It's a 2/4, and artifact spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. Can I just go through the list again, right? This can't be Go for the Throat because it's an artifact creature. It has 4 toughness, so it can't be hit by, Anoint with Affliction. Well, not Anoint. It can't be hit by Anoint. What am I thinking? Nowhere to Run and Virtual Persistence or Lightning Strike. Those are important benchmarks. Can't be ever killed by Torch the Tower. That's an important benchmark. Hadn't really brought that one up enough this season. So, altogether, kind of tough to cast. Can't be cut down because of the 2/4 stat line. So, I don't know. I kind of don't mind the stats and creature type, or card type, I guess, artifact. But, again, I don't know if this is that good in Standard unless you cast like a 5-drop artifact the next turn or a couple of, 3-drop artifacts. I guess you could get away with doing that. So, there's ways to make this cool, but I'm not sure it's quite there. In Commander, though, I think it's a pretty good part of the 99 of basically any, artifact-centric deck. So, this little common could see play there. It could also see play in Pauper, but we'll have to wait and see. Wreckage Wickerfolk is our next to last card of the day here. This is 2 mana, 1 and a black for a 1/3 Scarecrow artifact creature with flying. When it enters, Surveil 2. Whole card. Entire card. This is probably the worst card that I actually decided to point out today, and it wasn't like I was trying to get to 15. I just kind of got 15 cards. I just didn't want to not point this dude out because I don't think that he's super powerful, but I also kind of like him. This is a 2 mana 1/3 flyer is not good enough. It just isn't. But enter Surveil 2 means that you can have a dude that is a creature. So if he gets milled into your graveyard, he counts for Lurgoyf and all the other cards that care about how many creatures are in your yard. But if you just play him on turn 2, he's a pretty decent blocker. He blocks in the air. I like that. And Surveil 2 is just mill 2 most of the time. And that can be pretty valuable depending on what you're in. Ultimately, I think there's way better options in Standard, but I don't know, he just kind of caught my eye. I like Scarecrows. But the actual final card of the day, the one that I like the most, is Magmakin Artillerist. This is 3 mana, 2 and a red for a 1/4 Elemental Pirate. Cycling 1 and a red. Whenever you cycle this card, it deals a damage to each opponent. Whenever you discard 1 or more cards, this creature deals that much damage to each opponent. Now, I want to go ahead and say right off the bat, I'm not sure this is great. I don't know if this sees too much play in Standard. Kind of expensive to not really do too much the turn it comes into play. It's a 3-drop that dies to cut down, but it doesn't die to, again, Torch the Tower, Anoint. Well, it does die to Anoint. Stop doing that. It doesn't die to Torch the Tower or, oh my God, Nowhere to Run or Virtual Persistence. I guess I've said them so many times this previous season that my brain wants to be done with them. But again, 4 toughness is an important benchmark in this Standard. This has that going for it. But yeah, man, it cycles. So there's kind of I feel like any card that cycles, that's the floor. The floor is always just are you going to cycle the card? So 2 mana, draw a card at instant speed is the floor, and okay, it's not particularly low, you know what I mean? But if you can get this on turn 3 and then wheel a bunch of cards somehow, turn 4 you play Elder Dragon War and read ahead to the second mode that allows you to discard as many cards as you want and draw that many cards. Well then, he's going to lava axe your opponent on 4. Now, notice that they're not dead. It's going to take a while to actually kill your opponent with this guy. Multiple copies would be nice. But it is interesting that he says whenever you discard 1 or more, and then that much. He deals that much. All of the Discard Matters cards in this set are worded that way, and they all seem really, really good as a result. This one may not be the best of those effects, obviously. Again, I think the 1 mana Shark, that whenever you discard any number of cards, it gets that much larger. That thing's nuts. But honestly, when it comes to this, it's going to deal a little incremental damage to your opponent in Limited. I don't hate it there. It's common for Pauper if you wanted to try something really fun. It's also kind of Commander playable in the right pile. I've taken place in some Commander games where somebody had 25 cards in their hand. That would be pretty good. It's each opponent, so you don't have to choose who gets these hands. Everybody can just die at the same time. I don't know, man. I think it's got Pauper and Commander playability on it, and it's got I want to try it on stream and fail miserably written on it too. But I'm kind of excited about cards like that from time to time. But that is all that we got today. It's not technically right. We got 35 or so cards this afternoon, but again, most of them are just the absolute dregs. There's garbage from the set. And so I tried to pick out the best ones, but if you saw one that I didn't point out here, let me know down there in the comments section which one it was, and maybe we'll make a point to talk about it at some point in the future. But in any case, that is all I've got for Aetherdrift spoiler season for now. Obviously, I've got top 10 sleepers, top 10 cards. I actually just stopped talking to my bud. I didn't stop talking to him. We just finished talking. Me and Power Dragon. So he's going to be having the top 5 underrated cards on his channel. I'm doing top 5 overrated cards on mine. And yeah, I've been doing a lot. There's so much more work left to be done. So make sure you stay tuned into the channel and all that stuff as we keep kind of releasing videos during Aetherdrift pre-release season. But that is all I've got for this one. I will have more to say on Aetherdrift at large in a video where I defend the set with my entire heart, or at least I'm going to try to as well as I can. So I'm not going to get into a whole like end of season, this is how I feel thing in this video. I'm going to do that about a week from now, I think. But in any case, let me know how you feel about it. I already know how you feel about it. You don't like it, but there's cool cards in this set, I promise. Look at this guy. He's awesome. Anyway, guys, for now, do all the YouTube stuff on your way out. Hit the thumbs up button shaped like a thumb. It's pretty clever that they did that, right? You can also sub to the sandwich or the channel, whichever you prefer. If you want to sub to the sandwich, I guess that's your prerogative. But channel would be helpful to me. Apart from that, I have a Patreon. $1 a month is all it takes to vote on what decks we do when the Mario Kart set comes out. I know you're excited, but apart from that, I'm more or less donezo for this one. So that is all I've got for this one. Thanks for watching, Wizards. Spread love and be kind.